Hey guys, so today on the MeToo podcast, we're going to be talking about some basic information that people may have when they first hear about the MeToo movement. And we're going to be answering the questions like how did it develop into what it is today, and how does religion play a role in the MeToo movement?
So first, we will begin talking about the origin of the movement. So most individuals caught wind of the MeToo movement during its peak in 2017. However, the movement was originally founded in 2006 by community activist Tarana Burke in support of survivors of sexual violence, and she paid special attention to young women of color from low-wealth communities. Burke first coined the phrase through her nonprofit Just Be Inc., which advocated for the health and well-being of young women of color. Burke herself, who was sexually assaulted as a child, found that the phrase "Me Too" could help assure others that they were not alone in having experienced abuse.
Why is the movement associated with the entertainment industry?
So, although Burke coined the term first, the phrase beamed in popularity after actress Alyssa Milano tweeted the hashtag in 2017 in light of the recent controversies surrounding film producer Harvey Weinstein and his reports of sexual abuse against women in the entertainment industry. And her tweet was, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too" as a reply to this tweet.
What do you think the impact of this tweet was?
So I believe the tweet helped people visualize the scope of how many women have gone through the same thing. You know, women are taught to stay quiet or be shameful about something that happened to them. And this tweet essentially gave women a voice, which in turn allowed other women to feel comfortable speaking out because they realized they're not alone. And from there, it sparked this online phenomenon with the hashtag MeToo, which helped raise awareness, gave voice to survivors, and led to many cultural and workplace changes.
So moving forward, we will now address the goals and strategies of the movement. The MeToo movement has developed several goals since it was created. Some of these goals consist of creating pathways for healing, action, justice, and leadership for those that have been sexually assaulted. The movement strives to provide help in anyone's healing journey, no matter what point a person may be at.
What were some of the goals at the beginning of the social movement?
The MeToo movement was developed in 2006. The goals that the MeToo movement held in those early years was to develop a movement that could bring resources to those healing from sexual assault and violence.
What does the MeToo movement look like now?
Fast forward to 2017, the MeToo movement hashtag went viral and woke up the world to the magnitude of the problem of sexual violence. The work and goals of the MeToo movement in the recent years has focused on young people, queer, trans, the disabled, Black women and girls, and all communities of color. The MeToo movement consists of working to disrupt the systems that allow sexual violence to proliferate in our world.
What would you say the overall main goal of the MeToo movement is?
The overall main goal of the movement is that one day nobody will ever have to say "Me Too" again. Ashante, what are the strategies of the MeToo movement?
So when it came to the strategies, the primary method of the MeToo movement was using social media, particularly Twitter, but it found its way onto other platforms such as Instagram and Facebook. And the interesting thing about the MeToo movement is that it took a reverse approach compared to other online movements. So many online movements started offline and made their way online, but MeToo started online and eventually started to move offline.
How big did the hashtag MeToo get at the movement's prime in 2017?
So in 24 hours, the hashtag was used more than 500,000 times, sparking a social movement that started completely online. Tweeting one's experience was an easy, convenient way for women's voices to be heard, and the online participation carried the movement greatly. And with the power of the internet, the hashtag's popularity increased funds within nonprofit organizations that supported the movement.
How much more popularity did these nonprofit organizations get that supported the movement?
So author Katie Hill, she researched 180 organizations that served women, and she found that the total dollar amount of donations through the MeToo movement site to those nonprofits has jumped 7% in the past year, with the number of donations up 13%. And the Me Too movement also raised awareness through stunts, such as actresses wearing all black during the Golden Globes in 2018, which showed solidarity and support of the movement. So now we can discuss what makes the Me Too movement a social movement. So, Allison, how do the social movement theories we discussed in class help us understand this movement?
So there are theories like the intersectionality theory that are helpful in understanding why a social movement is created. This theory explains how oppressed groups of people often band together and work for a common or related goal. And the Me Too movement is a good example of this theory because it brings people to work together who have been sexually assaulted and abused, and they're working towards the goal of having their voices heard. The political process theory can also be helpful in understanding what social movements are and how the Me Too movement relates to it. Because the political process theory defines why people choose to be a part of a social movement using two factors: good news and bad news. So, good news is represented often by political opportunities, and bad news is represented by potential threats. So, for example, the Me Too movement has gotten a lot of bad news or threats in recent years. If you go on social media online, there's a lot of comments talking about how the movement has been watered down, and even like people saying, oh, like that's why men don't want to go up to women anymore because they're just scared that it's going to be called assault or harassment. And that's losing sight of what the movement is really about. Good. So, Marley, how do you think that this movement has shed light on some themes and arguments in social movement theory?
The social movement theory says that new social movements don't fit in the outline of past traditional social movements. This is because past traditional social movements fight over economic and material benefits. The Me Too movement fits the social movement theory because it merely wants to spread awareness of sexual violence against women. It's not looking for anything primarily monetary or materialistic. By amplifying survivors' voices, the movement has spurred important discussions about power dynamics, gender equality, and social justice by elevating the voices of survivors. It has clarified how ingrained culture injustices and power disparities give rise to power imbalances and allows this misbehavior. All theories of typical social movement incorporate relative deprivation theory, theory of collective action, resource mobilization theory, and structural strain theory, all of which can be found within this movement.
Women who have experienced harassment at work experience a feeling of being overlooked. This sense of deprivation is a prerequisite for the beginning of a social movement, but it's not sufficient. According to the collective action, a social movement is a group of logical, self-interested individuals acting in unison. By giving the social movement that represents the situation, many more women express their sufferings in public, saying, "Me too." This allows a woman to identify with a larger number of women and who have also experienced harassment, assault, or sexual assault. This unity is quite strong. This mobilization of resources has been made easier by technology like social media. For this reason, after almost 2 decades, a large number of women have come forward.
Allison, what role does religion play in the Me Too movement?
So religion comes into play here in the way that the Me Too movement gained traction in religious sectors, and it prompted people, particularly women, in religious communities to speak up about sexual violence in their faithful institutions. What's really interesting about religion here is that it created like a whole new wave and kind of like another part or factor of the Me Too movement under the hashtag Church Too. So the problem was brought into a religious frame, which showed people like church leaders, teachers, and parents also not helping the rape culture and sexual violence that was unaddressed in Christian sexual education. Hashtag Church Too became a hashtag similar to Me Too, and people started sharing their stories. But it was particularly pertaining to women's stories of abuse in churches and other religion-based institutions. In the church context, particular dynamics are at play, like purity culture, which is sort of a culture of shame and silence, which promotes abstinence in relation to women's sexuality, as well as other toxic teachings like complementarianism, which is basically a biblically based gender ideology that God created men and women as equals in worth, but they have distinct roles that they are meant to play in the home, relationships, and in church. And this was indoctrinated in women from a young age in conservative evangelicalism. Sexual harassment and abuse are also often rooted in the belief that women are less worthy than men. And there is specific interpretations of scripture that can be used to support this. For example, that women were created second, that Eve ate the apple, and there's some unsettling directives given by the Apostle Paul. So, people in power, like pastors and male figures in the church, can use these interpretations of scripture as evidence and then, teach it to people during mass. And it just further supports this idea that like women are less in church. So it gives them, I guess, more of an excuse to abuse women. And it makes women not feel like they can speak up. When women did speak up about this and like told the church management about it, they were usually told to just like, seek healing in secret. So they weren't actually addressing the issues, which is why the hashtag has gained so much popularity in institutions. Thanks for coming to our podcast. Tune in next time.